The phone rang while the coffee was still brewing. I let it ring once longer than usual, watching the steam curl up like nothing in my life had changed. Do you have any idea what you've done? No hello, no pause, the heat's off, the internet isn't working. I tried the card twice, declined. This isn't funny, I waited. Let the silence stretch just enough to be uncomfortable. We have guests coming this weekend, she continued, voice tightening. You can't just pull things like this without telling anyone. My spoon rested against the mug. I didn't stir. So you're saying you didn't mean to do it, I said finally. A sharp breath on the other end. Of course I didn't mean to do it. Why would I even think you'd... She stopped herself. Then colder. This affects everyone. Not how are you, not are you okay, just impact, just inconvenience. You should fix it, she said. Today. I looked at the clock. 3 days since the lunch. 3 days of silence until something stopped working. I'll think about it. What does that mean? The edge crept in now. This is family stuff. You don't get to make decisions on your own. I smiled small and private. I'll call you back. Mom. I ended the call before she could finish the word. The kitchen went quiet again. No ringing, no follow-up. I knew she'd be texting already, lining up her version, preparing to explain why this was my fault. I didn't open the messages. I sat down instead, hands folded, heart steady in a way that surprised me. People expect panic from women my age. Tears. Justifications. Long explanations meant to soften the room. There would be time for context. There would be time for explanations, just not yet. Because the truth didn't start with a shut-off notice or a declined payment. It started at a table dressed for a holiday, with polished silverware, with practiced smiles, with my daughter leaning in close enough that no one else would hear her and telling me calmly that it was time for me to leave. If any of this sounds abrupt, it's because it was. Not the phone call, the certainty behind it. To understand the call, you have to understand that lunch and what they decided I was worth. The story you are about to hear is a work of fiction created by the Her Shadow Channel team based on real-life situations to convey lessons about family emotions and human values. All characters and events are illustrative. The moment I stepped inside, my daughter was already moving. Sit here, she said, guiding me toward the far end of the table before I could take off my coat. Not unkind, efficient, like assigning seating at a work event. I hesitated. She didn't. That chair, she repeated, fingers resting on the back, already decided. I sat. The plates were arranged perfectly. No one touched anything yet. Everyone waited for her. We're doing lunch a little earlier, she announced, glancing around. Let's keep things light today. Light meant controlled. My son-in-law smiled too quickly. Mom made her famous roast, he said, like reading from a card. My daughter nodded once. Let's not bring up anything stressful. It's a holiday. Her eyes flicked to me when she said it. Just long enough. Conversation started the way it always did, now updates without substance. Traffic, weather, someone's new workout routine. Every time I opened my mouth, she redirected. We can talk about that later, she said, when I mentioned a neighbor we all knew. Maybe not today when I brought up a family plan that involved actual decisions. At one point, I laughed at something my grandson said. Too loud, apparently. Her hand lifted slightly. Not a shush. A signal. I lowered my voice without thinking. The fork paused midair when I noticed what I was doing. My daughter sat straighter than everyone else, posture composed, expression settled. Not tense. Prepared. Everything okay, Mom? She asked. Sweetness layered over inspection. Fine, I said. Good. She turned back to the table. I just want today to go smoothly. No one questioned what that meant. My husband focused hard on his plate. My brother-in-law avoided eye contact. The rhythm was familiar. Keep her comfortable. Keep things moving. I watched them all talk around real things, careful not to bump into anything sharp. And slowly it became clear this lunch wasn't about celebrating. It was about presentation, about deciding what fit, about deciding who didn't. The room didn't tense before it happened. It settled. Like everyone had already agreed silently on what came next. And I was the only one who hadn't been told yet. I was halfway through the meal when my daughter leaned closer, close enough that her breath brushed my ear, close enough that no one else had to hear what she was about to decide for me. "This would be a good time for you to head out." I turned slightly. Not because I didn't hear her, but because I expected something else to follow, a qualifier, a softening. There was none. She continued, voice even. "And it's probably time you stop relying on the family." The words landed without force. That was what made them cut. My fork rested against the plate. I didn't set it down. I didn't lift it again, either. Around the table, conversation thinned, then disappeared. Someone cleared their throat and didn't speak. Someone else reached for a glass they didn't drink from. The silence wasn't confusion. It was alignment. I looked at my husband first. His eyes stayed on the food, cutting it into careful pieces, as if precision could shield him from choosing a side. My son-in-law shifted in his chair, the faintest wince crossing his face before he smoothed it away. Not his place. Not his problem. Further down, my brother-in-law let out a quiet breath through his nose, something close to a sigh of relief. Like a moment he'd been bracing for had finally arrived. No one said my name. My daughter waited, patient, composed, not watching me plead, watching me comply. "I didn't mean it unkindly," she added, "the way people do when they mean exactly what they've said. It's just, we've all been carrying a lot. Carrying me." The words settled in my chest, heavy and wrong. I thought of all the times I'd stepped in so no one else had to feel the weight of anything. The late calls, the quiet fixes, the things smoothed over so holidays could stay pleasant. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. Across from me, someone nodded. Not in agreement, in permission. My daughter straightened, already turning back toward the table, as if the matter were settled. As if my presence had been an item on the agenda now checked off. I nodded once, slowly, enough to let her see I understood. Then I pushed my chair back. The scrape against the floor was louder than any argument could have been. I drove home without turning on the radio. The quiet felt earned. By the time I reached my place, the words were still there, sitting where they'd landed. Relying on the family. Carrying you. They didn't echo. They arranged themselves. I set my keys down and heard my daughter's voice again, not raised, not sharp, certain. The kind of certainty that only comes from repetition, from a story told often enough that it stops sounding like a story at all. "Can you cover it this time? Just until things settle. We'll make it up to you," I always nodded, sometimes out loud, sometimes just by opening my wallet. When the roof leaked, I paid the contractor and told everyone it was handled. When the car died, I made the call, wrote the check, asked for nothing. When tuition came due and the timing was bad, I said we'd figure it out. We always did. Quietly. At family gatherings, the thanks came in small, harmless shapes. A squeeze of the arm, a quick smile across the table, nothing that lingered long enough to feel like acknowledgement. "It's such a relief knowing you've got it," my son-in-law once said, already turning away. I thought that was trust. Over time, the requests stopped sounding like requests. They arrived already decided. "Go ahead and take care of it. You don't mind. You're good at this stuff." Good at this stuff meant dependable. Dependable meant invisible. I never wrote anything down, never kept track. I told myself love didn't count receipts. Love showed up. Love filled gaps. Love absorbed pressure so no one else had to feel it. Sitting there now, coat still on, I realized when the language changed. Help became normal. Normal became expected. Expected became assumed. And assumed became entitlement so complete it could flip the story without shame. By the time my daughter leaned in at that table, the decision had already been rehearsed. Not to thank me, not to ask. To reframe me as the problem so no one had to look too closely at the structure holding them up. I stood and took off my coat. The role I'd played so well had finally been reassigned, and for the first time, I didn't rush to fill the space it left behind. I nodded once. All right. The word landed softer than she expected. I saw it in the way her posture shifted, the way her hand tightened on the edge of the table, as if she'd missed a step in a routine she'd practiced. She waited. For questions. For protest. For the familiar scramble to explain myself back into usefulness. None came. I reached for my coat instead. Mom, she started, then stopped. The pause was sharp, unfinished. Control works best when it's uninterrupted. My chair slid back. The sound cut through the room and did what raised voices never could. Heads turned. Forks stopped. No one spoke. This doesn't have to be dramatic, she said quickly, already recalibrating. I slipped one arm into my sleeve. Took my time with the other. I'm not making it dramatic. Her eyes narrowed just enough to show confusion. Then why are you leaving like this? Because you asked me to. That wasn't the answer she wanted. She'd wanted resistance, negotiation, something she could manage. My husband cleared his throat, then thought better of it. His gaze dropped again, a familiar retreat. My son-in-law stood halfway, then sat back down, caught between manners and relief. Let's talk about this later, my daughter said, voice smoothing out. When everyone's calm. Everyone was calm. That was the problem. I fastened my coat and reached for my bag. No one moved to help. No one offered to walk me out. The absence felt deliberate, like part of the lesson. At the door, I turned back once. Not to plead. To confirm. She was watching me closely now, measuring, already adjusting her narrative to fit what I wasn't giving her. I'll see myself out, I said. Her jaw tightened. A flicker crossed her face, something like unease. I stepped outside without waiting for permission. Behind me, the door didn't slam. It closed carefully, the way people do when they want to pretend nothing irreversible has just happened. I walked to my car with my shoulders steady and my hands loose at my sides. For the first time in years, I left a family gathering without fixing a single thing. The door closed behind me, and the house didn't react. No creak of protest, no sense of accusation, just space. I set my bag down and opened the laptop without sitting first. The screen lit up familiar, almost courteous. I didn't go hunting for surprises. I went where I always went. The first account loaded, then the next. Utilities lined up month after month, steady as a heartbeat. Property upkeep for a place I rarely used but everyone relied on. Insurance policies renewed automatically. Tuition assistance transferred on the same day, every term, no reminder needed. Seasonal repairs approved with a single click, the kind of problems that disappear before anyone has to acknowledge them. My phone buzzed once. A message preview from my daughter slid across the screen. This needs to be fixed. I didn't open it. I scrolled instead. Dates, amounts, patterns. Years of quiet decisions that kept other people comfortable enough to forget they were decisions at all. You always handle this stuff, my son-in-law had said once, handing me a stack of papers without looking embarrassed. He'd meant it as a compliment. Another buzz. This time, a voicemail notification. I let it sit. I leaned back and finally sat down. Not from shock, from fatigue. The kind that settles when your body realizes it's been bracing for a long time. I spoke out loud just to hear the words land somewhere solid. I didn't imagine this. No one answered. That was fine. I opened the settings tab slowly. Autopay. Recurring transfers. The invisible scaffolding behind their normal. The voicemail light blinked again. I imagined the tone on the other end. Tight, urgent, practical. I closed the message app without listening. This wasn't anger. Anger would have been loud. This was alignment. A simple decision to stop performing a role that only existed because I kept stepping into it. My fingers hovered, then pressed down. Confirmation screens appeared, polite and final. Each click felt like setting something heavy on the ground instead of carrying it another step. When I closed the laptop, the room stayed quiet. For the first time in years, the numbers weren't waiting on me. They were done. The next morning, my phone rang before I finished breakfast. "I need you to reverse whatever you did." My daughter said words stacked tightly, like she was holding something back. "This is already causing problems." I wiped my hands on a napkin and stayed where I was. "You didn't even tell us," she continued. "That's not how family works." I let the silence answer first. "When something affects everyone," she added slower. "Now you don't get to decide alone. I decided the day you told me to stop relying on the family." Her breath caught just for a second. "That's not what I meant." "It's what you said." A sharper edge slid in. "You know exactly what I meant." "I know exactly what I heard." Another pause. This one longer. "Calculating." "You're being dramatic," she tried again. "This isn't about money." "Then it shouldn't feel like a crisis." She exhaled through her nose, impatience breaking through the polish. "You're punishing us. I'm doing what you asked. That's not fair." I leaned back, letting the chair creak. Neither was being told to leave. Her voice dropped. "So that's it. You're just done." "I'm done carrying things that were never mine alone." The line went quiet. Not disconnected. Waiting. I could almost see her weighing her next move, searching for a lever that still worked. "You're forcing us into a corner," she said finally. "No, I stepped out of one." She didn't respond right away. When she did, the certainty was gone. "We need to talk about this in person." "We already did. That wasn't a conversation. You spoke." I listened. Then I acted. Another silence. Thinner now, less confident. "Less. I never said you were a burden," she said carefully. I stood and carried my cup to the sink. "You didn't have to." The call ended without goodbye. I didn't check for messages after that. I didn't reopen the accounts. I didn't correct the story she would tell next. I had followed her instruction precisely. And for the first time, I wasn't waiting to be corrected. The calls came in waves. My phone lit up with my daughter's name first, then her husband's, then a number I didn't recognize, until the voicemail identified it as my brother-in-law. No one asked how I was doing. No one referenced the lunch. They went straight to symptoms. The cabin's freezing. My daughter snapped when I finally answered. The heat shut off in the middle of the night. "Do you know how embarrassing that is?" I waited for the rest. It didn't come. Her husband took over without greeting. "The internet's down. We had people coming." "This puts us in a bad position." "A bad position," I repeated. "Yes. Because you didn't say anything. I wasn't asked to." Another call broke through before he could respond. I declined it. By midday, the tone shifted. The anger softened into urgency. Urgency dressed up as concern. "This is about family responsibility," my brother-in-law said later, voice careful. "You don't just stop things without talking it through." I stopped things I was paying for. That affects everyone. It always did. Silence followed. Short. Uncomfortable. My daughter called again that evening. The edge was gone, replaced by something strained. "We should sit down," she said, "all of us. Clear the air. There's nothing unclear. There is for us." That was the first honest sentence I'd heard all day. "I didn't mean it the way it sounded," she added quickly. "You know that. I know how it landed." She exhaled, frustration slipping. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be. I'm letting it be exactly as big as it is." Her husband cut in from somewhere nearby. "We just need things back to normal." Normal? The word hung there heavy with assumption. Normal depended on me, I said. And I'm not doing that anymore. The line went quiet again. Not because they had nothing to say, because they were recalculating. By the end of the day, messages filled my inbox. Requests framed as reminders. Reminders framed as warnings. Warnings dressed up as concern. Still no apology. Just the sound of systems failing once the person who kept them running stepped away. And in that noise, something became unmistakably clear. They didn't miss me. They missed what stopped working without me. We chose a place with other people around. Not crowded, not private, neutral ground. That was her idea. She arrived first already seated, hands folded, expression composed. Her husband slid in beside her a moment later, jaw tight, eyes scanning the room as if looking for exits. "You didn't have to make this public," she said, before I sat down. "I didn't," I replied, taking the seat across from her. "You did when you decided to rewrite me in front of everyone." Her mouth tightened. "That's not fair." I set my bag at my feet and rested my hands on the table. "You asked me to stop relying on the family." She nodded once, cautious. "Yes." "Because you were crossing lines. This family relied on me," I continued. "For years." Her husband shifted. "This doesn't need to be dramatic." "It doesn't," I said. "It just needs to be clear." I opened the folder and slid it across the table. Not legal threats, not ultimatums. Records. Pages neatly organized. Dates, transfers, maintenance, insurance, tuition assistance, seasonal expenses covered quietly, consistently. Her eyes dropped to the first page, then the second. Her breathing changed, slower, shallower. "I didn't know it was all this," she said. "You didn't ask." She looked up sharply. "So this is about money, this is about reality." I leaned in just enough for her to hear me clearly, without raising my voice. "Every financial benefit I provided has ended." The words settled between us. Final. Unembellished. Her husband opened his mouth, then closed it again. He picked up one of the pages, stared at it longer than necessary, and set it back down. My daughter didn't move. She didn't argue. She didn't deflect. The color drained from her face in a way I hadn't seen before. Not anger, not offense. Absence. "You can't just..." She started, then stopped. The sentence had nowhere to go. I already did. Around us, conversations continued. Glasses clinked. A server passed by without slowing. Life carried on, she swallowed. "So what now?" I stood smoothing my coat. "Now you rely on yourselves." Her face stayed blank as I stepped away from the table. This time, no one tried to stop me. The silence afterward was steady, not dramatic. No shouting, no public scenes, just small adjustments rippling outward. My phone rang less. When it did, the voices on the other end sounded careful, like people stepping onto unfamiliar ground. "We're figuring things out," my son-in-law said one afternoon. Not accusing. "Reporting. That's good," I replied. There was a pause. He seemed to expect more. Reassurance, maybe. Guidance. I didn't offer either. My daughter sent a message a few days later. Short. Neutral. "We need time." I read it once and set the phone down. "I do too," I said to the quiet room and meant it. There were no grand apologies. No dramatic realizations delivered at my doorstep. Bills got paid later than usual. Plans were scaled back. Someone else learned how to make the calls I used to make without being asked. At a family gathering I wasn't invited to, my name came up once. I knew because my husband mentioned it carefully, like he was testing the temperature. "She said you were taking space." "That sounds accurate." He nodded, relieved not to be pulled into anything heavier. Days settled into a slower rhythm. Mornings stretched. Evenings didn't feel rushed. I wasn't checking my phone with that low hum of expectation, waiting to see who needed something fixed before it turned into a problem. When my lawyer called to confirm everything was settled, his tone was professional, almost casual. "You don't need to do anything further," he said. "I'm not planning to." He hesitated. "Most people push for more. I'm not most people." I hung up and sat there for a moment, Hands folded, breathing easy, not triumphant. Grounded. I thought about the table, the way my daughter had leaned in, the certainty in her voice when she told me who she thought I was. She hadn't taken my family from me. She'd taken a role I never agreed to keep playing, and walking away from it didn't feel like loss. It felt like standing on my own ground without apologizing for it, without explaining it, and without carrying anyone who refused to carry themselves.